Hi, it's Katrina! From massive cannons to brilliant swords, here are 10 of the most unusual pirate weapons of all time. Number 10. Blunderbuss. The blunderbuss is commonly considered a predecessor of the modern shotgun. It has a short, large caliber barrel that flared at the muzzle and was typically used for short-range firing due to its lack of accuracy at long range. It was especially handy for close combat, making it ideal for use in both military and urban warfare. The weapon was also ideal for novice users because of its relatively lightweight, manageable size, and spread shot, which helped compensate for accuracy issues. I mean, this is good because when you go around robbing ships and recruiting from the captured sailors, they weren't necessarily the best shot. This intimidating-looking musket, which was common between the 17th and 19th centuries, is named after the Dutch word Blunderbuss, which means thunder pipe or thunder gun. It spiked in use during the early 18th century and was popular among military, civilian, and criminal operators by the mid-1700s. George Washington even championed the use of the blunderbuss for the Continental Army during the American Revolution. But this weapon is best known for its association with pirates and privateers, especially due to its usefulness in close combat in warfare on and between ships. Consequently, it was also common for naval use, including by the British Royal Navy, which issued it to its sailors for some time. Number 9. The sword breaker. The sword breaker, also called the sword catcher, was a type of parrying dagger, a category of small handheld European weapons from the late medieval and Renaissance periods. Its blade was deeply serrated along one side, like the barbed teeth of a comb. This notched weapon was a rare type of parrying dagger, in part because it was complicated to manufacture. It was a relatively late development in its category, appearing around the year 1600. The weapon was designed for disabling an opponent's blade by trapping it, also enabling the user to strike with some other weapon. Whether or not it could actually break a sword blade, as its name suggests, is debated among scholars. At the time, swords were generally made to withstand substantial force and were often depicted in martial arts manuals as withstanding a double-handed attempt to break them. Late Renaissance blades were known to be less resilient and to occasionally break, however, possibly offering some credibility to any claims that sword breakers break swords. It's been said that if the person wielding a sword breaker is skilled enough, they can use it to trap axes and pole arms. Now you can get an Assassin's Creed sword breaker yourself on Amazon and parry away. Number 8. Hand mortar. The hand mortar is an ancestor of the modern grenade launcher dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries. Depending on the date of manufacture, it was used for throwing fused grenades, similarly to a flintlock, wheellock, or matchlock firearm. It typically had a short barrel measuring between 2 and 4 inches, but hand mortars with barrels as long as 13 inches have been known to exist. These weapons had a large bore measuring between 2 and 2.5 inches to accommodate the grenade. To use a hand mortar, one would first fill it with gunpowder. Then they'd light the grenade fuse, place the grenade into the muzzle, aim, and fire. There was a tendency for these weapons to occasionally misfire as a result of a lit grenade remaining lodged in the barrel, and botched attempts at modifying hand mortars caused lit fuses to force into grenades, causing them to instantly explode. There are not many surviving hand mortars, indicating that it was not a very popular weapon, perhaps due to its major safety issues. Number 7. Nock gun. The nock gun was a 7-barreled flintlock smoothbore firearm invented by British engineer James Wilson in 1779. It was named after Henry Nock, a London-based manufacturer who was contracted to produce the weapon. I'm sure he was the blunt of all the knock-knock jokes. All 7 barrels were welded together, with 6 of them clustered around a central barrel. The gun operated according to a standard flintlock mechanism, with all 7 charges igniting and firing more or less simultaneously when the flash reached the central chamber. The British Royal Navy purchased 500 nock guns during the Napoleonic Wars, with the intention of using them to fire at enemies in the event that they boarded the ship. They soon learned the hard way, by trying to use the weapon during combat, that its design was inherently flawed. For one, the recoil was much stronger than they thought it would be. Not only did this make the gun difficult to control, the kickback was so powerful it often injured or even broke the shoulder or arm of the person firing the gun. Officers hesitated to order the use of these weapons because they also feared that the sparks would set fire to the ship's sails and rigging. To remedy the initial problems associated with the nock gun, a shorter version was developed, but this too proved to have too powerful of a recoil for practical use. In 1804, the Royal Navy took them out of service. If you want to see a nock gun for yourself, there are examples on display at the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia, the Royal Armories Museum in Leeds, England, and the Charleston Museum in South Carolina. Number 6. Pistol sword. The pistol sword's history goes back to 17th century Europe, and it was what it sounds like, a sword that fired bullets. The first versions of it coincided with the advent of the flintlock and were used by French and German hunters for killing wounded boar and other animals. It was designed primarily for use as a sword, with the firearm being considered secondary. Similar weapons were manufactured in Poland, India, and elsewhere. Besides hunting, the pistol sword was also used as a military weapon, but it was neither practical nor popular due to the flintlock mechanism's tendency to offset the sword's balance and the angle of the hilt's grip interfering with accuracy. The U.S. Navy developed its own version of the pistol sword in 1838 called the Elgin pistol, but only 150 were ever made. They were meant for use in the Wilkes South Seas expedition between 1838 and 1842, a mission on behalf of the U.S. to explore and survey the Pacific Ocean and its associated land masses. Got to defend against pirates, too. The weapons apparently came in handy on the island of Malolo when Fijian warriors attacked the sailors. Despite its problems, for whatever reason, the basic concept of the pistol sword intermittently regained its popularity among inventors and weapon makers into the early 20th century. In fact, in November 1916, a man from Wisconsin named John Krasnodębski filed for a patent on his own modernized version of it. Krasnodębski's pistol sword was a standard sword with an automatic pistol attached to the side of the hilt. The thumb trigger was located on the right side of the hilt, making it an ideal weapon for a right-handed operator. The U.S. government awarded Krasnodębski his patent in August 1917, and while his design is just one example of many pistol swords that existed over the centuries, it's unknown whether this specific version of the weapon was actually manufactured. Number 5. The cutlass. A cutlass is a type of slashing sword or saber that is short and broad with a slightly curved blade. Cutlasses were popular during the early Age of Sail, a period that lasted from the mid-16th to the mid-19th century, when sailing ships dominated naval warfare and international trade. The word cutlass derives from the 17th century English version of the 16th century French word for a machete-like blade, cutelass, which is a corruption of the Italian word for large knife, coltellaccio or cortellazzo. Confused? That's okay. The weapon got around. The cutlass was a classic sailor's weapon, pirate or not, because of its versatility. It was practical for cutting through wood, heavy ropes and canvas, as well as the rigging and below deck, and more effective at close combat than a large blade. This weapon was also user-friendly, requiring less training to master than other types of swords. Historically speaking, the cutlass is a famous pirate weapon, but any claims that Caribbean buccaneers actually invented it are unsubstantiated and can be chalked up to a common misconception. Cutlasses were used by several well-known pirates and their crews, however, including William Kidd, William Fly, and Stede Bonnet. Buccaneer François l'Olonnais was known to use a cutlass as early as 1667, according to French historian Alexander Exquemelin. Interestingly, pirates didn't always use their cutlasses for fighting. Sometimes the mere sight of a band of buccaneers simply brandishing them was enough to intimidate a crew into surrendering. When that didn't work, pirates occasionally resorted to beating their captives into submission with the flat of the weapon's blade. Of course, as weapons became more advanced, cutlasses fell in popularity. The British Navy stopped carrying them in 1936 and switched to using them solely for ceremonial duties. The cutlass remained in official use in the U.S. Navy until 1939, but was rarely used in training after the early 1930s. Number 4. Butterfly swords. Butterfly swords and similar weapons are known by a dozen or so different names, including Hu Die Dao, Wu Dip Do, Bat Cham Do, Shuang Dao, double swords, and double short broadswords. This weapon has its origins in early 19th century southern Chinese martial arts. There are several different styles of butterfly swords, but generally speaking, they are used in pairs and have a small crossguard meant to protect the wielder's hands. While they were never officially used by the Imperial Qing military, they were highly popular among civilian users, and their use overlapped between different groups. For example, many civilians were also soldiers, militia members, pirates, or bandits. Butterfly swords weren't just used for martial arts or in southern China. Not only are there accounts of them appearing in the north of the country, they gained some popularity outside China as well. British military officers kept detailed first-hand accounts of these weapons, as well as their uses and the methods of their operators. There are not many surviving butterfly swords, and they are highly sought after by historians who collect them as artifacts and martial artists. Number 3. High Seas Artillery. During the Age of Sail, the high seas were dominated by large wooden, sail-powered warships. These ships were primarily armed with cannons of various styles and sizes. Consequently, naval tactics were developed around these cannons, which by modern standards were short-ranged, difficult to load, and inefficient overall. Moreover, a great deal of labor and manpower were required to fire a cannon. They used a lot of gunpowder, which was kept below deck for safety reasons. Ship crews typically employed powder boys, which were young boys between 10 and 14 years of age, to retrieve the gunpowder and bring it up to the gun deck for use. The gunpowder was then put into the barrel and rammed in with a rammer, followed by a cloth wad. Then the shot was placed in the barrel, followed by another cloth wad. This prevented the cannonball from falling out if the muzzle was pushed downward. Nearly the entire crew's manpower was required to roll the cannon out to its intended shooting position, as these weapons weighed nearly 2 tons and had to be pushed into place while the ship rolled on the water. Contrary to the endless cannon fire warfare depicted in pop culture, shooting holes into an enemy ship and potentially sinking it ran contrary to a pirate's goal of collecting as much booty as possible. Since it made much more sense to disable a ship rather than destroy it, pirates often shot cannonballs more for intimidation than with the intention of actually causing damage, often using small cannonballs and aiming above deck to avoid hitting the ship, instead hitting enemy sailors and destroying masts, rigging, and sails. Number 2. Grappling hook. A grappling hook was a special 3 to 5 pronged cannon round that fired a hook into a crippled enemy vessel and grabbed onto it, enabling pirates to reel the ship closer in order to board and loot or seize it. This is one of the older pirate weapons around and has been around since the Bronze Age. It has its roots in naval use, but its purpose has always remained the same: to rip into and capture enemy ships. Additionally, grappling hooks were sometimes swung at enemies rather than fired from a cannon. Not only is the grappling hook one of the oldest weapons, it's also one of the most timeless. Classical pirates use them, and you may be surprised to learn that so do modern pirates. Somali pirates are known to use grappling hooks by tying ropes to them, swinging them onto ships that are much taller than the speedboats they use, and then climb up the ropes to board the vessel. Number 1. Boarding axe. Another popular Age of Sail item was the boarding axe, which had a blade and a pick, and was commonly carried on ships not only for traditional warfare, but for fighting fires, which often resulted from battles with enemy sailors. Axes were always part of a vessel's equipment and could be used as a combat tool when you were being boarded by the enemy. It could cut through ropes and lines to attack opposing crew, and it was just all around handy. Back when wooden sailing ships were the norm, fires were an ever-present hazard, especially given the use of explosives and other flammable materials. Boarding axes also came in handy for general repairs and for felling trees, on the rare occasion that a seafaring crew spent time on land. These weapons were primarily used for breaking down doors, smashing windows, making holes in walls or roofs to release smoke, and any other way that they might help facilitate a rescue or reaching safety. The pick side of the boarding axe could be used to pry or force things open, or for prying a cannonball out of the ship's wood before it started a fire. Other damage from fires and battles, such as fallen rigging, could be cleared away with this multi-purpose tool, which was useful for cutting and dragging the wreckage out of the way. Thanks for watching! Which one was your favorite? Do you want to hear more about pirates? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!